Welcome to the Low Carb Athlete Podcast, where we focus on discussing topics to help you burn fat, optimize health, and improve performance in life and sports. Transform the whole you from the inside out with the holistic method. Let's dive in. Here's your host, Debbie Potts.
Hey everyone, I've got the beautiful, sexy Dr. Gabrielle, Lyon on the show today. Thanks for coming on today and sharing your information that we all need to hear.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Can't wait. I'm really looking forward to it. And we met actually in Portland.
Yes, right before that was like the start of the coronavirus pandemic. So we were just talking about how at Nutritional Therapy Conference, you spoke on a panel, and I just find this is the topic on protein and low carb and fasting. As our listeners are, endurance athletes doing triathlons, Ironmans, 50K trail running, doing a lot of excess cardio, I'm trying to encourage everyone how to improve the aging process, work on vitality and longevity. And my story is more with chronic stress. I haven't been able to do any of that since 2013. I became broken and burned out every body system cell in my body. I think since then, since my body was just doing too much in life and too much racing in endurance world. So my focus is really health building podcast for the low carb athlete and educating people, of course, what is health and longevity and what you talk about in your website. I want to kind of dive into what muscle centric training is and all that. So kind of talk about your journey and we'll kind of how you got to where you are now.
Absolutely. Well, I trained for a long time. I did 17 years of professional education, which is a long time, right? My initial training was in human nutrition, vitamin, mineral metabolism. And that was at the University of Illinois under Dr. Donald Layman. And for people that really love nutrition and protein, he is one of the world leading experts in protein metabolism. To backtrack a little bit, my godmother, who was actually at the conference that we met at, and one of the main reasons that I went is Liz Lipsky. And Liz Lipsky, for people who don't know, is one of the OGs of functional medicine nutrition. She wrote the epic book, Digestive Wellness, that's now in its 5th edition, and speaks and is a professor and a teacher on functional medicine as it relates also to gut health. I mean, she's very smart. So, many interwoven topics here, but really, I moved in with her when I was 17 years old.
Wow.
So from 17, that was my focus. So at 17, I knew that I wanted to do nutritional sciences. From there, I went to the University of Illinois, studied under Dr. Donald Layman, decided, and I'll never forget the story, but there was a tornado warning and we all had to go into this fallout shelter. And I had already been studying vitamin, mineral metabolism, human nutrition. There was a tornado and we all went to the fallout shelter and we were there for hours. And I'm thinking to myself, man, I have got to be able to do something that really can move the needle. If I needed to help save someone's life, I want to know how to do it. And that really put me on the trajectory to medicine. Throughout that training, I did 2 years of psychiatry, 3 of family medicine, and then a postdoc at WashU in obesity medicine, nutritional sciences, and geriatrics.
Wow.
Yeah. So all the while, for sure. And all the while, it was a constant quest to chase healthy body composition. I was pretty athletic growing up. I then went on to compete and, in dance, gymnastics, and that evolved to fitness and figure, which is all about body composition. For me, I was on this quest for optimal body composition. And interestingly, during that quest, I realized that muscle is the organ of longevity, truly and deeply, not just for aesthetics, which was my original draw, but above and beyond aesthetics, truly the health of an individual midlife, 30s, 40s, really paves the way and the trajectory for their capacity of aging.
Yeah, I've been learning or studying more about HPA axis and hormones and women as we age, especially, need to add more protein and lift weights more. And it's so amazing just to study that about hormones and what benefits our hormone balance. And as people premenopause, menopausal, how important that is. And I think it's never really discussed enough.
It's not. And as it relates to nutrition, that's a phenomenon. So there's two folds to that phenomenon. And you bring up a great point. There's the anabolic resistance component. And what that means is that the body, the muscle tissue in particular, is resistant to an anabolic stimuli. And that anabolic stimuli for muscle tissue is in particular amino acids. And one amino acid shines above all the rest as it relates to muscle health, and that's leucine. Anabolic resistance means as you age, you actually require more protein at one time to be able to get the same stimulus effect in your 40s that you did in your 20s. So you actually need more protein as you age. And that is that component of muscle protein synthesis and body composition is not particularly related to estrogen and testosterone. It is. So all of body composition for sure is related to estrogen and testosterone and insulin. But we are just on a fundamental level looking at purely what you can ingest to make an impact on your tissue and make an impact on your body composition. And that relates simply to getting enough protein in at one time to stimulate muscle protein synthesis to overcome that anabolic resistance.
Well, then you add on chronic stress and cortisol. This is going to break it down, and the whole balance. I was talking earlier about homeostasis. The balance of everything in our entire body is all about that Goldilocks effect, just finding that right amount, fine-tuning everything to optimize performance or health, longevity. But too much of anything causes dysfunction. So with chronic stress and excess cortisol from people training too much or just life stress, environmental toxins, food, whatever, what that does to our body and how we have more breakdown than build up.
Absolutely. So you're talking about really the balance between anabolism and catabolism, and the catabolic effect of high endurance, of exercise in itself is a catabolic process. You are not building muscle at the same time you are training. That muscle anabolic effect happens post-training. That happens in the recovery phase. It doesn't happen when you are running for 50 miles or training for, in your training block. The goal is for health and aging, and especially health and aging of a athlete, and really anybody, but as an athlete, is to be able to replenish amino acids, because amino acids are what help with muscle protein synthesis and recovery. So when you have two goals in mind, post-training, you think about glycogen repletion, and glycogen repletion is one bucket, and that's really based in carbohydrates. And then you have muscle repair, which is not related to the muscle glycogen replenishing. Protein repair is based on the full spectrum of amino acids, both essential and non-essential. And that is really the target when you think about how can you maintain performance over the long haul. When you're young, you can get away with doing a lot more things and not being as precise. And you can be all over the place. You could be on the Twinkie diet and probably make improvements, right?
Yes.
However, as we age, and when I say age, over the ripe old age of 25, right? You start creeping up in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s. You now are less driven by hormones overall, and because your hormones have a natural decline. DHEA declines, testosterone declines, estrogen will decline as you hit that perimenopausal stage. So what that means is that in order to maximize your muscle tissue and really maintain health, you have to become much more conscious and strategic in your ways of refueling. And on a fundamental level, really it is about protein. And protein, interestingly, is the most underrepresented macronutrient. And here's how I can explain that. If anyone listening, pick up a wrapper they'll look at the back of the nutrition information and it'll say total calories, and then it'll say fat, and it'll break down fat. Then it'll say carbohydrates, and it'll break down carbohydrates. And then you'll get to protein, and you have one measly line for protein. But
Sure.
there's the quality of the protein is completely dependent on the amino acid profile. But so the incomplete protein of, say, a plant-based protein will say, for example, I'll give you hemp protein. So if you look at a hemp protein shake and it says 30 grams of protein, you'll look at the back, it says 30 grams of protein. But the quality of that protein equates to 15 grams of what the body needs.
Got it.
Case in point in this concept of all proteins are not created equal.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, if you take home nothing from this conversation other than the fact that, number one, protein needs increase as you age. The amount that you eat per meal is absolutely essential to define and execute on. And number three, the quality of the protein, plant versus animal, they're different. Plant protein is inherently lower quality. And that means you require 25 to say 40% more. So in order for that 30 grams of hemp protein to be equivalent to an animal-based product, you would need to have about 45 grams.
So I probably should back up to explain what muscle-centric medicine is, and then there's like 100 questions. You just
So So muscle-centric medicine is a term that I came up with, and this was born out of my years, over a decade of clinical experience of seeing obese patient after obese patient, of seeing patients with Alzheimer's, of seeing diabetic, hypertensive, cardiovascular disease, just you name it, I saw it. And the striking similarity in all these patients is that they had body composition issues. Interestingly, everybody was focusing on adiposity. And if you focus on the problem, you get more of the problem. Being over fat is not the issue. The issue is being under muscled. Adiposity is the byproduct of having impaired muscle. The paradigm of thinking about this is totally wrong. It's incorrect. And that's why the recidivism rate is so high. The relapse rate of people and their ability to lose weight is incredibly high. And you see it all the time. There's the yo-yo dieting. And the reason is because we continue as a society to focus on adiposity and fat tissue as the problem. It is not. It is a symptom of a problem. And the real problem is impaired muscle tissue, not enough skeletal muscle and quality of skeletal muscle, right? So the quality of the skeletal muscle, you need to deplete your muscle glycogen, you need to deplete your muscle tissue so you can utilize that for storage, to store carbohydrates, for glucose disposal, for fatty acid oxidation. If you think about muscle as a suitcase and you are constantly stuffing things in, the only thing that's going to happen is it's going to spill out. You're never going to move the needle on body composition if you don't move the muscle.
So doing more lower carbohydrate, and then you're saying, if we have impaired muscle, is that because we're eating too many carbohydrates and not enough protein?
And not training enough. It's twofold. So carbohydrates, your body doesn't need it. There's no essential need for carbohydrates. There's an essential need for red blood cells for glucose. However, for every 100 grams of protein that you eat, 60 grams is converted to glucose through gluconeogenesis.
So that's what's restocking our muscles, and the muscle glycogen is from protein, not from carbs.
It can be. You can be one of two ways. You can be carbohydrate dependent, and that means that your body will become accustomed to being dependent on your meal to meal carbohydrate intake, or you can be carbohydrate essentially independent and generate your own glucose through gluconeogenesis.
Now, is that with doing nutritional ketosis and intermittent fasting, or just going low carb and eating a higher protein diet?
Exactly. You don't need to go into ketosis.
you can still get the protein that you need and get the muscle glycogen refilled from protein. And that will help us, along with more strength training and muscle building activity.
Help you with everything. Yeah. So it'll help you with everything. While carbohydrates and protein both have 4 calories per gram, the thermo effect and the movement in the body is different. Protein requires about, as it relates to thermogenesis, 15% more energy to dispose and process it, whereas carbohydrates. So you're going to get a much different effect if you're eating 50 grams of carbohydrates, or let's say 60 grams is a better example, 60 grams of carbohydrates versus 60 grams of protein. They might have equal calories, but the benefits of having protein, in my personal opinion, outweigh the benefit of having carbohydrates. And here, there for a number of reasons. Number one, and I spoke about this, is it is the fuel of choice for the muscle, right? It's necessary. Yeah. And maybe fuel of choice is the wrong word, but it is what is necessary to maintain your organ of longevity. Period. Hands down. You want to age well? This is what you got to do. You don't want cardiovascular disease, glucose issues, high cholesterol. There's that familial component, but you need to have healthy muscle. So that's one aspect. So the healthy muscle for protein is one. When you are consuming the base amount of protein, you cannot partition that protein to other aspects of the body. For example, when you are functioning on a lower protein diet, and this is in the framework of protein and carbohydrates, not necessarily protein and ketosis, which, by the way, I don't actually use a ketogenic diet very often. I come from the camp, and maybe my views will change, but I come from the camp of optimal protein. This is where my training is. This is what I have seen for thousands of people that I've seen work well. So as it relates to the benefits of protein, we know it helps with muscle. The other aspect is when you reach a certain amount of protein where your baseline protein turnover needs are met, you can then use the amino acids, which is what we really need, to do other things in the body. For example, arginine, one of the amino acids, is essential for nitric oxide production. What does that mean? It means it helps with vasodilation. It helps with blood pressure. That's just one example. Yeah. So these amino acids, once you take off the table that they're being utilized for muscle, at higher levels can do so much more. They help with hormones. They help with neurotransmitters. They help with, you name it, they are the building blocks. Glutathione production, branched chain amino acids for immune health, for lymphocytes. Mm-hmm. So there's so many other roles that dietary protein plays, but if you can't get the fundamentals right, then you won't begin to advance the needs. You won't partition to these other more advanced processes, because the body will trade long-term survival for short-term.
Mm-hmm. So are you speaking for yourself? Do you more of a carnivore, to put a label on it?
I do.
Somewhere like the nose.
But doesn't mean everyone has to.
Yeah.
Right. So I've eaten this particular way for decades without having a name to it.
Yeah, I know that's what everything's like. I didn't know I was doing OMAD or IFTRE, all these names.
Well, I don't even know, what does OMAD stand for? What does that mean?
1 meal a day.
1 meal a day. So I don't think that is for muscle health. That is not strategic.
Yeah. So
and we can come back to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, let's dive into that. So what should we eat, and the timing, and
Sure.
No carbs, and that people is confusing for a lot of.
Let's clear it up right now. Let's knock it out.
Gut health.
Ready?
And everything. Go.
No. Number one, people make things way too confusing.
Yes.
And that's a barrier to entry that needs to be eliminated immediately. So let's eliminate it. Number one, determine your age. If you are young, carry on. Do whatever you'd like to do. You can have 20 grams of protein or less per meal. Go ahead. Now, if you are mid-20s, 30s, or let's even move this up to 30s and 40s. So when you're young, you kind of can do whatever you want. Please choose a healthy diet. Make sure you get your protein. Okay. Now, for everybody else, I am about to give you a simple rule. Are you ready? Do this for 30 days. Do this for 30 days, and then everyone should get back to me. Determine how much protein you need. Determine this based on your goal weight, not your ideal body weight. For example, I'm 125 pounds. My goal protein is 125 grams of protein. Period. End of story. You do that. You start there.
Got it.
Everybody.
Easy math.
Everybody listening needs to start there. Simple. Okay? Number one. That's it. Number two, you determine your carbohydrate needs if you choose to eat carbohydrates on a meal-to-meal basis. That means, now, just so you know, I don't believe that you need carbohydrates, but at the risk of sounding too extreme, it's totally fine to eat them. Vegetables. It should be, yeah, whatever you want, fine. Mostly vegetables, yes. The quality, the micronutrient density is all important. If you are training for body composition, and we're not talking about performance now because there ends up being a very fine line, the higher the training level, the health, it's inversely related, right? So if you are training for body composition, you are going to determine your protein need, number one. What's your goal weight? Let's do you.
Well, I'm tall, so
great.
I'd say 150.
Fine, so perfect. 150 grams of protein is your goal. You are then going to split that up into, let's say you want to eat 3 meals a day, right? And we'll put you in a time restricted feeding window because you probably like that.
Yes.
Am I right? Okay, great.
Well, not intentionally. It just works better.
So we can split you up to 3 meals a day. And if we put 60 grams of protein per meal, which is a lot, or actually we don't even need 60. So if we put you at 50, done. You had 50 grams of protein per meal 3 times a day.
So people say you can't digest more than, is it 20, 30?
All of it. You digest all of it. It's nonsense. And actually 50 grams of protein will probably max out muscle protein synthesis for you. So and I want you to get back to me in 4 weeks. I'm going to hold you accountable.
Well, I've been talking a lot. We did a Dutch hormone panel test, and I interviewed the doctor that does the Dutch test about hormones and females.
Carrie Jones, the amazing,
not Carrie
beautiful.
Jones, but Dr. Debbie Rice, but she works with Dr. Carrie Jones. And like just use me as an example, I think that's why I keep encouraging everyone to do lab testing. It's like you don't know what's going on with your body, but
doesn't matter. I mean, it matters, but if you're wanting to optimize your muscle,
yes,
the only thing that's going to determine is you're going to have to reduce your carbohydrates.
Yeah,
it's not going to change the amount of protein that you need. That is the one thing that hormonally it's not going to change.
So eat more protein and adjust 0
to... So we are going to do it very specifically for you. So we are going to say 50 grams of protein per meal. We're going to avoid all confusion. We've determined your protein intake. We are going to then determine what your carbohydrate intake is. Your carbohydrate intake, if your estrogen is low, estrogen does relate to glucose metabolism. It does play a role in, if everyone gets my newsletter, I just put a great article in there on estrogen metabolism and skeletal muscle. And it's free. It's great. It's a great article. I think it was from Nature Endocrinology Review. But then the next thing you have to determine is your carbohydrate intake. And I think that determining carbohydrates next is important because carbohydrates, glucose in and of itself, while needed in the body, is cytotoxic. And the goal is really 50 grams of carbohydrates or less. And the reason is, and that's probably too high. So when you come to my clinic in New York City, you're walking out of there in 90 grams of carbohydrates or less to start, right? Yeah. You don't want to scare everybody away, but they're highly motivated. Then you determine your carbohydrate intake, which is going to be 50 grams or less, whether it's from vegetables or not, because of the increase in insulin. And the body doesn't even need the carbohydrates. And the fat is all within reason. So I don't necessarily believe you need to add in excess fat. I think the majority of people overconsume. Keep it at 60 grams. So you'll be effectively on a optimal protein diet, which would be 150 grams of protein. You can choose to have 90 grams or less of carbohydrates divided throughout the day. You might find that you don't even need that. I would say most people don't. And then you can add in fat as needed. And that's it. Simple.
Yeah.
It is. It truly is. It is simple if you understand the concepts. And you know, the reality is, I have a post on my Instagram about this, that if people want to read, there's an obligatory carbohydrate use. So the body requires a certain amount of carbohydrates that can be generated, which is about 90 grams.
Okay.
And that can be generated by the body.
Yeah, so you don't need it. Because that's
the rest you earn. The rest you earn.
Yeah. So talk about that with gut health, and then I'm going to talk about the MTOR and PK pathways, because people talk a little bit. But the microbiome, hear different things. Microbiome, and then acidity versus alkalinity, pH balance. So what's
that's totally been, well, it's been it's been proven to not be adequate. The body maintains a very narrow pH, irrespective of what you're eating. Otherwise you would die.
Yeah.
So that's completely false and been totally misproven. The body is very good at its acids-base balance, truly.
To zone any intelligence will keep it in the right amount.
You'll die if it's not.
Yeah.
It was an anti-protein narrative. That's all that is. It's an anti-protein narrative. There's no truth to acid or alkaline balance. No matter what anyone says, it's nice to believe, but it's not true. Okay. And listen, if you were concerned, have some green powder with your protein. If you were concerned, it doesn't have to come from a carbohydrate source. Add in those minerals.
So, and then that kind of correlates with gut health, the microbiome and healthy balance. Do we need certain vegetables to feed our microbiome, like prebiotics?
Well, I am not a microbiome expert, but I think that the data is pretty clear that prebiotics are very helpful. And then probiotics are helpful as long as that you're taking them. I utilize them all the time in my practice. I believe personally that we will begin to see more and more information on the gut microbiome, as it does play a huge role, but the science is early. We're still in the early stages, The science is early.
So go back to your protein. So for athletes, let's look at my list. So protein versus carbs for athletes, endurance athletes. We know low carb athletes, we burn fat for fuel. So if we get enough muscle glycogen storage by having a higher protein intake, go to, how much your goal weight is and eat that many grams of protein divided up throughout the day. So for endurance athletes, is there any difference? Like some people might need to add a little more carbs, or you think that's?
Well, the recommendation, so it depends, right? So it depends on, how you function as an athlete. It's really hard to make blanket statements.
Yeah.
If the recommendation, I think it's the current recommendations in the literature, if you're a carbohydrate-based athlete, is 60 grams of carbohydrates per hour. That you'd be adding, which seems like a lot. I would never do that.
Yeah.
And I would never recommend my athletes. In fact, I don't ever recommend my athletes to do that. I always see how they perform around their events and see how they do. And then you adjust from there. So prepping in the off season, seeing what you can maintain. So typically it can become a calorie issue. And it is, there are components of that can be a calorie issue, whether you're getting your calories from fat or not. But in endurance training, there is a breakdown of protein that happens. So having extra protein, and even with a lower quality meal, a lower quality protein meal, you can add in branched chain amino acids to help with that, because the branched chains are utilized for fuel.
Sure. So I know you spoke at the conference a little bit about MTOR, and that's a big thing in the fasting community about the AMPK pathways to increase fat burning. But, if we have too much protein, we'll activate the mTOR cycle and all that.
I'm going to lay a little bit of the background for people who don't know what mTOR is.
Yeah, thank you.
So mTOR is mechanistic target of rapamycin, and it is in every cell. And it's a growth pathway that's been maintained since we've been alive. And it is a growth pathway, meaning that it stimulates growth, and it's different and has different roles in every tissue. There's mTOR signaling in the heart, there's mTOR signaling in the liver, there's mTOR signaling in the muscle. So now we understand mTOR. It is a growth pathway. The anti-animal narrative runs so deep that somehow the anti-animal group, the people that don't believe in eating animals, determined that if you eat protein, it stimulates mTOR, and that's going to kill you. They're right. Eating protein does stimulate mTOR. Do you know what else stimulates mTOR?
What?
Exercise.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
You know what else? So there's mTOR in the muscle tissue that is exquisitely sensitive to amino acids and exercise, which we can all agree is a good thing. Mm-hmm. We know that if you don't have healthy muscle tissue as you age, you have an increased risk of morbidity and mortality. Mm-hmm. Your ability to stay alive and healthy totally declines. So we can all agree on that.
Yes.
Right? And we can all agree that exercise is good for you.
Yeah.
And we can all agree that no one is saying that if you exercise and stimulate mTOR that you shouldn't exercise. Mm-hmm. No, we're not.
Yeah.
What if I told you that mTOR is more potently stimulated all over the body by insulin? Mm-hmm. And in particular, excess calories. So truly, mTOR can be an issue if you are overstimulating mTOR in your liver and your pancreas and all the other cells in your body. But what is the major driver of mTOR is excess calories and excess insulin. That's the problem. And all the studies that have been done up to date that I know of as it relates to proving that mTOR is bad were obese, excess fed rats. And then they somehow extrapolated that to be about protein and animal products. And it's just not true. It's just not true.
Yeah.
It's not true. I think that everyone here who has an aging parent would say, man, I don't think that I should reduce the amount of exercise or protein that they're eating.
Good point.
The narrative that we hear is so deep and so misinformed that it is keeping people sick, unhealthy, and frail.
Yeah. Good point.
And you have to understand that the funding comes from different places, right? Yeah. I am a big beef advocate. I absolutely support beef, support animal products, because I have seen and been at the bedside of very sick, aging, and frail individuals. And I know that in order to protect their tissue from sarcopenia or to help fuel them in a time of cachexia, which is highly catabolic, high muscle wasting, you need high quality protein. And I'm sure everyone's saying, oh, well, does it have to be animal based? No, but why wouldn't it be? If you are an animal rights activist, then I can understand. But that's one whole, that is someone's ethical view, and I completely support that. Mm-hmm. But you cannot say for 1 second it is better for health and wellness. It's not. To not eat animal products. It has B12, zinc, selenium, carnitine, all things that are incredibly essential for just baseline functioning.
Yeah, methylation and cycles and your mitochondria.
There you go. So
that's why I started eating meat last year. I wasn't eating red meat since I was 13 years old. I stopped eating animal meat except for turkey and chicken. Now I can't stand turkey and chicken. And then I started eating
Me neither. I'm with
red meat, grass-fed beef, and I get Butcher Box twice a month. And it's been a year, and it's so essential. Everything I was deficient in, and studying mitochondria function and methylation cycles, like, okay, that's all in this food. If I just have this grass-fed burger and steak every day, it's amazing.
Right. So I completely support that. And I have seen that those patients that do that do the best. So when you think about mTOR is not a bad thing as it relates to protein and muscle health. If you are stimulating mTOR with excess carbohydrates and insulin, that's a problem. mTOR is a problem when it is overexpressed from excess carbohydrates and insulin. Period. End of story. Yep.
Cell autophagy.
Not my expertise.
Okay. Yeah.
Can't help you there. I'd love to, but I mean,
I know.
you know,
it just it's so interesting because hearing about MTOR and AMPK and
so
they
are they counterbalance each other.
Yeah.
So when MTOR is high, AMPK is low. AMPK is high in fasting, right? So that's, you know, as it relates to autophagy, which is cleaning the cells, but you know.
So let's go back to protein. When is there optimal time to have it? I know I've read Dr. Stacy Sims' book Roar, which I don't know if you've read that, have your opinions, if it's different or similar, but like for women, 30 minutes before workout, she says, and afterwards.
It's not. The data does not, no. So, I mean, I can just tell you my experience and what I have seen clinically from and read from the world leading protein experts. And by the way, I think Stacy Sims is great. I do have her book. I think it's great. As it relates to protein metabolism, it is pretty clear. And actually the data on women is a bit different and still emerging.
Yeah.
I think that is still emerging. I, have a couple friends that have a lab at Fullerton, UC Fullerton, and they've done some of the first female studies. So the data right now, as it relates to muscle protein synthesis, is protein prior to a workout is not necessary because there's two ways to stimulate muscle tissue. And I guess the end goal is what you're looking at. So if you're looking at muscle protein synthesis prior to a workout, it's unnecessary. Post-workout, it can have benefit because there's an increase in blood flow.
Okay.
Right. So there is an increase in blood flow. So you're bringing more nutrients to the muscle.
Yeah.
The data as it relates to aging population is the closer to training, the more impactful the protein has on muscle protein synthesis, on MPS. As it relates to a younger individual, there is some support that all that matters is within a 24-hour period. However, clinically speaking, if you can eat your protein after your meal, it is possible that it can help with a reduction in soreness. Again, this is anecdotal. And why wouldn't you have it?
Yeah.
So, right?
So the timing, the carbohydrate, are you more into the time restricted eating window that we don't want OMAD, you're saying isn't beneficial, the 1 meal a day, but having your, say, 53 meals a day, 50 grams of protein for me, 3 times a day.
Which I'm super excited about. I'm excited for you to try this and for me to get to the report.
Yes. Accountability.
Yes. So tell me, so your question is in terms of timing of protein or carbohydrates? The timing
of your protein. So, you're saying you're not a big fan of 1 meal a day because we can't eat 150 grams of protein in 1 meal, but digestion wise, I would think too, you want to spread that out. And, are you saying are you a big fan of intermittent fasting, time restricted eating? So we're having that 150 grams of protein throughout an 8-hour window.
I mean, yes, I am a fan. And yes, I utilize that in my practice. I think really determining what your goal is, what your metabolic goals are, really determine your choices.
Yes.
If your metabolic goal is maintenance, you could get away with 2 meals a day and getting your protein in with 2 meals a day. Is that ideal for altering body composition? Probably not. For body composition, it's really of critical importance to have muscle as healthy, as viable as possible. And I personally believe that 3 times a day to stimulate this tissue is helpful, right? And you space it 5 hours apart. We don't really know how long it takes for mTOR to be reset and then re-stimulated, but just from my conversations with some of the researchers, they believe that it's about 5 hours, 5 to 6 hours.
So in between eating, you're saying to digest.
Because you stimulate the muscle, you stimulate mTOR, and then mTOR resets.
Yeah, I'm a good example of, I suddenly am 48. And
congratulations.
I have always been.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I find that, everyone's N equals 1. We always say everyone's bio-individual. There's not one size fits all approach, but how you have to individualize it. And I must admit, I have been doing intermittent fasting and trying to do, 1 or 2 meals a day. But I find that, I don't think that's working for me. I'm not, like, if you do stuff and it's not working, like, I'm not as muscular as I was. I've got my hormones, as I said, I'm like DHA, estrogens are like at the very rock bottom. And just as an example that I feel like, yeah, this is a good experiment for me, because what I'm doing right now is not giving me the results I want for my body. And I like having more muscle. I like feeling lean and strong. And, we're not able to go to the gym and lift heavy weights right now, but, I've been doing yoga and, that kicks my butt, and doing hills, biking and running. But I think you have to look at, are you doing something that someone else is doing and you're kind of following trends? Or, are you stopping going, is that working for me? Am I getting the body I want? Is my performance the best? Do I feel I'm improving my health and looking at longevity is increasing? So I think it's
those are great
example.
Questions. Those are incredible questions. And that's the right frame of mind to be in, and the right way to think about it. And the one thing that I will say on that behalf is that determining a plan and sticking to it for a month is a good plan. Mm-hmm. And then actually having the capacity to evaluate and really vetting that program well. For you, maintaining tissue at 40, you said 48 or 49?
49 this November, but 48 still.
Congratulations, 48. And really doing what would be best for your tissue. So for you, having 1 or 2 meals a day is not going to be ideal. Mm-hmm. Truly, and really upping your protein. Arguably, I don't even think a ketogenic diet would be great for you right now.
Well, that's what's interesting. For years, we've done, I've done low carb, high fat for 20 years before it was even really known as nutritional ketosis. I'm not, strict ketosis in and out of it, but I find that it was just what I just said. Is this working for me? Is my body what I want it to be? And then you have to make those adjustments. So high fat isn't working for me. Low carb is, but higher protein is what my body's missing.
I would agree.
Yeah.
And then making sure when you're training that you're doing some if body weight's all you have access to, then you need to really focus on that.
Yeah, no, I do better with that. So looking at digestion, do you ever work on digestion and, getting the right, like HCl betaine supplements and digestive enzymes?
All the time, for sure. All the time. One of the ways that you can do is you can measure your stomach acid with a Heidelberg test. If you don't have access to that, people pretty much know if they have low stomach acid, they won't feel great. And that's just anecdotally. They won't feel great by having a high protein load. And then it's a very low barrier to entry. It doesn't cost a lot of money to trial some digestive enzymes with HCl, or just digestive enzymes on their own.
Yeah, because I find a lot of people, one, they don't sit, focus, and relax when they're eating. So I always talk about what you're eating, how, when, and why. Right. That you have to sit and be kind of in a meditative, relaxed, focused state, like you're on vacation when you're eating, especially eating a higher protein diet. It's harder to digest. You have to make sure you're chewing your food properly, breaking it down. And then I think myself and most people I work with as clients need digestive enzymes and HCl support to really get it. But
totally.
So any other tips on like the amount of protein? 5 to 7 grams is what, you hear about the branched chain amino acids. I've read a few different places.
What do you mean? So branched chain amino acids.
Post-workout,
there's no reason to take branched chain amino acids. I mean, unless you're having so again, what's the goal? If the goal is muscle protein synthesis, then you need a full complex of amino acids, essential and non-essential.
Okay.
Adding in the branched chain, exactly. Having the branched chain amino acids by themselves, that is not going to help with muscle protein synthesis. Anecdotally, can it help with soreness? Yeah, probably. Okay. But is it going to help with, and again, you have to think of the goal. So there's so many other benefits to branched chain amino acids other than just muscle protein synthesis, right? Mm-hmm. Its effect on fat oxidation and affecting some of the other things that we talked about earlier. But as it relates to performance, then you need a full protein spectrum. And
So
it should be 5 grams. It's a 2 to 1 to 1 ratio. Okay. And needs to be 2.5 grams of leucine.
Leucine. And how are you suggesting yourself or your clients? Are you eating like grabbing real food like a burger or steak afterwards?
Depends. It depends.
Shake.
It depends. So I definitely take care of the highly motivated individual. And, my husband's a Navy SEAL, so I definitely see a lot of athletes, and those guys don't want to eat right after. So they have a shake.
Yeah.
And the
so
shake
I find
is
I'm not hungry after a workout. I don't really want anything. So
great.
You feel like a shake is, if you're not feeling hungry, you should have something, a liquid shake, protein.
I feel that if you are not hungry, you can easily wait a period of time. But again, if you're wanting to optimize, if you're aging, and most of us are, then having a liquid meal would be fine.
All right. Okay, so I'm looking at your website. You've got my friend Mike Munsell on there. He's my
great.
neighbor.
I love Mike.
Kind of neighbor. I knew when he was a kid before he was so famous. But your website, drgabriellelyon.com, and social media links and everything we'll put in the show notes. But anything else we can send people to, upcoming events you're doing, projects?
So I have a weekly newsletter that hopefully everyone that listens and NTPs are all signed up for. I do and spend a lot of time curating the information on there. I provide a couple evidence-based articles, books that I think are valuable to both the lay public and professionals. So it's a great newsletter, and send it out once a week or so, once a week now because we're all at home. Sometimes it's bi-weekly or bi-monthly. The other thing is I have a Lyon protocol for free on my website, so they can easily download that. And that is valuable. I have a second one that's largely written, but I need to adjust the carbohydrates in terms of what my recommendation is for carbohydrates. And then I'll be offering that for free too. I will have courses launching in the next I'll probably launch it in 3 weeks.
For anybody or practitioner based, or is that?
Anyone could benefit. And I'll speak to everybody, and then I'll have more advanced learning. So some more advanced modules for you guys who are professionals that I find and think will be very relevant and help clear up confusion for you.
Love that. I'm in. Yeah, I think a lot of NTAs after the conference, led the nutritional therapy practitioners, people don't know what that is, really were interested in everything we're saying on the panel because there's so many different opinions. And I think from my own journey and my own experience and education that I've been in as a FDN practitioner, doing lab testing and looking at stress and really looking at aging process, is protein for me, and lower.
What a great story. This is a great story. And hopefully you'll lead the charge and really, people all get to the point that you're saying. At some point or another, they all say, man, I need more protein. And it's physiologic, right? And you've been smart enough to listen to your body. And hopefully that will inspire everybody else who's not quite at that phase, or, they're kind of coming up, maybe not starting to feel great. And then we can take them and say, okay, hey, look, I'm going to save you 5 years of suffering. And here's how we're going to do it. Let's go.
Exactly. I mean, that's been my mission. Is I started my breakdown 2013. And I'm like, that's 8 years. You don't want to be suffering 8 years in this cycle of trial and error, trying to figure out your body and how to optimize your health. It's like, all right,
totally agree.
It goes by. So I appreciate your information so much, and tons of information on your website. I just clicked on the Mythbust Monday. You can only absorb 30 grams protein a meal link just popped up. So I think.
Awesome. And I'm happy to come back on and happy to clear up some, maybe we could do a question and answer for the NTPs.
Yes, I will see what they posted on our Facebook page, but I think the education is key for people, and sign up for your blog. And it's an ongoing process. We keep learning and stuff all the time. So you just never stop as a practitioner or as an athlete. You got to keep learning and growing.
Totally agree.
So thanks so much. Hopefully you can enjoy your day at home with your little baby.
Yes, she's so cute, quite busy.
How old's your baby?
8 months.
8 months. Wow. Yeah, you're staying at home is keeping you probably busy.
It's busy. It's busy.
Okay. All right. Thanks so much for your knowledge and your passion and creating impact in our world.
Thank you so much for giving me the platform to be able to share.
Thanks for listening to the Low Carb Athlete Podcast. If you have any questions, feedback, or topic suggestions, let us know on Facebook or at debbiepotts.net. You can help us to continue to grow by leaving a review on iTunes. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.